So in this section, we're going to be talking about PowerPoint presentations. So first of all, in terms of preparing a presentation is similar to a paper. It takes time. You're trying to take oftentimes you'll already have a written paper, or at least part of one, and you're going to try and convert it into a spoken presentation. And it takes time, of course, because reading and listening, or writing and speaking, are two different things. And I just also want to stress, it takes time to write a good paper. It takes time to prepare a good presentation. So you don't want to be like, yeah, I'm going to try and do this at the last minute. That will make a bad presentation. And the thing is, what's different between a presentation and a paper is I'm the only one typically reading the paper, but when you present in front of everyone. So what can you do to prepare a good presentation? Well, like I said, first of all, is you make sure to invest time, but you also want to focus on content over form. It's tempting because this is a PowerPoint presentation, where people will see that you focus on making a pretty PowerPoint. That's not important. Focus on the content, your information, and on how you communicate that information, not so much on making things look pretty. So to give you an example, oftentimes students, when they make a PowerPoint, will include lots of images, many of which are not actually directly connected to what they're doing. So anytime you have an image, you have to ask, what purpose does this image serve? Why is it here? You don't want to just say, well, here's my image, or not even mention it. Now, of course, if you're presenting about like Lyndon Johnson, you don't really need to explain having a picture of Lyndon Johnson. But in other cases, it's not clear why you choose a particular image. Like I said, sometimes you can have it there for flavor, but for the most part, if you have pictures, you need to explain why they're there, how they help your audience to better understand your paper. And if they're not directly included, they're not directly connected, leave them out. Add animations or transitions last. I get the feeling, again, sometimes people seem to emphasize that. So they make these presentations that are beautifully animated, have wonderful transitions, and don't say anything, and are just confused messes. Don't do that. Right? You can add all that stuff last. Get the content first. Get the content, then bring in the images, then bring in the animations, transitions, and so forth. And absolutely positively do not use music or videos. I've had people try and use music while they're presenting, and that's really, really distracting. And also, don't use a video. Right? It's usually, I've never seen someone use a video well in a presentation. I usually find that it just is a way to kill time. You need to do this yourself. Now, you can use a print screen button, or you can use Google or something if you're doing something on a movie. Like you may say, well, I want to show a video clip because I'm doing the history of a movie. Well, you can do that. Include still images and explain what's going on. That way, it's not just us watching a movie. So don't use music or videos. So in addition, when you're preparing your presentation, think of your audience. Make sure that you are not trying to cram too much information on one PowerPoint slide. You want to make sure that the font is clear and easy to read even from a distance. If you're in doubt, just add another slide. Keep the font size small. Don't try and overload your audience with too much information. Do not read from your slides. It is extraordinarily boring. There's no point in giving an oral presentation if you're just going to read. And what happens is the audience will just read the slides to themselves, and we'll get all that information, and then we'll just sit there waiting for you to catch up, because it's easier to read and faster than to read something than it is to say it. The one exception to this is your thesis statement or like a quote. If you're quoting someone, you don't want to do that from memory. But do not read your slides. It is extraordinarily boring. You have probably been in a class where a professor or a teacher has read the slides. It's boring. Don't do it. Instead, use your PowerPoints as an outline. One thing you'll notice the way I use PowerPoints is it's just usually an idea that I then elaborate on. And it's mostly just there to help me remember all the things I'm supposed to say. So use your PowerPoint as an outline. Now, what you can do is you could have, some information in the PowerPoint, and then you can have note cards that you look at to help you remember more about what you're supposed to talk about. But the key thing is you don't want to read your slides, use your PowerPoint as an outline. It's important to have rough drafts and to check them. Misspellings can sneak in. Errors in capitalization can sneak in. Mistakes can sneak in. Just like with a paper, you want rough drafts. You want to check over things. And when you feel like you're doing pretty well, practice on your own and with an audience. Stand in front of a mirror, go through your presentation, say it out. What you'll find is that as you say your presentation, you'll realize that you should reorganize some things, for example. You'll get a sense that maybe this slide should go first or this bullet point should go first, something like that. But then after you feel pretty good about it, after practicing, then you practice in front of a person. They can give you really good feedback, and you'll also get that sense of what it's like. Notice I'm saying you should practice this presentation multiple times. That's very important. So what about when you're giving a presentation? Well, there are several things you need to do. First of all, have multiple backups and send it in early. Now, you need to follow whatever the professor is telling you. They may have different rules. I usually require that students email it to me, and then I save it to a USB drive, and then I bring it. You have probably been in a presentation group where someone tried to access Google Drives or something, some online cloud or something, and they just can't get it up. They can't pull off their presentation. And it's really frustrating for that person because they're standing up in front of everyone, not being able to do what they're supposed to do. It's frustrating for the people who have to go after that person because they have to wait. So you need to follow these professor's instructions, but this is why I always, whenever I give a presentation, I usually have emailed myself a copy, and I usually have a USB drive. And sometimes I would even print it out because I've been in places where the PowerPoint went out. The computer wasn't working, so I just presented from what I printed out. That's also not a bad idea. But that's key, right? USB drives tend to work best, I find. But it's good to have multiple backups. Like I said, because I think this is really important, do not read directly from something except quotes, maybe your thesis statement. Practice a lot so you can look at people and talk. The more you practice, the easier this will be. Like I say, note cards I think are acceptable as well. I use the PowerPoint to help me remember what's going on. Sometimes people will use a note card so they don't have to keep looking over their shoulder or looking to the side. That's fine. Just make sure you also look at your audience from time to time. Also, what's nice about note cards is you can kind of write a note to remind yourself when to advance the slide. Otherwise, if you don't have that in there, you may forget to advance a slide. So you're in one section, but the rest of the audience is in another section. When you speak, make sure you do so slowly, clearly, and loudly. And this is where practicing is important. When people get nervous, they speak quickly. And you don't want to do that. You want to speak slowly, clearly, and loudly. And I mentioned that that you want to also, I have to stress this, keep to time. If a professor says you have 5 minutes, you have 5 minutes. That's important because if everyone takes too much time, the person who's scheduled to go last may not have time to present. And they'd have to present on a different day or something. And that's really terrible, right? You've got all the butterflies in your stomach and you're nervous about presenting. And now you got to go through this whole process again because people did not stay to time. When people don't stay to time, that's proof they did not practice enough. So you absolutely positively want to make sure that you have practiced, that you speak slowly, clearly, and loudly. And when you do so, you're still okay on time. Body language is also very important. Do not cross your legs while you're presenting. Some people, when they get nervous while they're standing, they'll cross their legs. It just makes you look weak and not confident. Some people will do this weird thing where they'll take 2 or 3 steps forward and then take 2 or 3 steps back. It looks really weird. And again, it shows that you're nervous. For me, I consciously will think, okay, have I stood in one place long enough? I think I have. I'm going to walk over to another place. And you also want to be careful about your body language. You don't want to do things that make it seem like you're not confident. This is why it's good to practice in front of a person. because they will tell you, yeah, it's really weird how you do this. It's really distracting. Stop. It's also important to keep eye contact. You don't want to just be like looking down your PowerPoint. You want to look around at the people in your audience, keep eye, look at them for each person, like for a second or two, move on to the next person. This is why it's so important to practice, right? This is why it's so important to practice. Because you'll know it so well that it's really easy for you to be careful with your body language, with your eye contact, with your voice. The more you know it, in a sense, the more you can worry about these other things. But the key thing is if you practice, it'll be really easy. Now, the last thing I need to talk about is being a good audience member. When you're in the audience, you give your full attention to the speaker. You do not check your phone. You do not write notes unless they're about what this person's talking about. You don't play around on a laptop. I think the angriest I've ever been at a student was when a student was using their cell phone during another student's presentation, and they did it in a very obvious way. That is incredibly rude, right? First of all, I hate use of cell phones while a professor's teaching. I think it's even worse in a sense when students do it, right? Because, you're students, you're supposed to be in this together, right? You're supposed to be organized, united against us, not against each other. Take that how you want. But the key point I want to make here is people who are presenting are nervous. People sometimes throw up before presentations. I've had people run out of the room crying, even though their presentation was fine. Like, I was really shocked when one student did that, because I'm like, she was doing fine. What happened? People are really nervous. And it's completely different when you stand up there and you look out and you see all these people smiling at you, looking attentively at you, listening to what you're saying. That's completely different from people messing around on their phones or something like that. And I can tell you, it gives me a lot of energy when I have an attentive class. I teach better. So it's very important that you make a conscious effort to be a good audience member, right? That you're paying attention. You're not doing anything distracting. Don't eat or open candy or anything like that, right? Don't open a pop, anything. Absolute quiet, attention fixed on the speaker. It's a thing you can do to help your fellow students. And also avoid me yelling at you in class. Because like I said, that was the one time I got really mad at a student. Usually the way to make me angry is to be mean to other students. It's kind of funny. In any case, be a good audience member. Practice. You'll do fine.